Hello and welcome to Identirati Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue. Today is episode 194. Before we get started, a quick reminder, please follow IOH on LinkedIn or YouTube. That really helps us out. The topic today is My Terms and IEEE 7012. Our guest today is Ian Henderson, longtime personal data advocate, My Terms Alliance volunteer, and most recently, DataPal co-founder. Welcome, Ian.
Hi, folks. Nice to see you all.
So, Ian, before we dive into My Terms, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your career trajectory. How'd you get here?
Yeah, I mean, the way I tend to think about it is I've always had the same job, right? I mean, I've been working for 35, 36 years, but essentially specialized very early. So I guess the big picture is I'm a CRM or marketing type person, but I've always been a data geek, right? So I've always been more on the scientific side of marketing or CRM, which essentially takes you towards where technology and data come together. So way back in my first role as a graduate trainee, I heard someone saying, "Oh, we need more people that understand technology and data and marketing." And I thought, great, I'm going to be one of those because that sounds quite valuable. And effectively, I've done the same thing ever since. I've worked in different sectors, different countries, etc., but always at that point where marketing and data comes together. So I guess that might be quite boring. Same job for 35, 36 years, but I still enjoy it.
You know, you reminded me how long you've been at this because I posted, I remember I saw, I guess I was first exposed to this watching Doc Searles, I believe, at a Digital Identity World presentation. The one I saw was in Las Vegas, but you mentioned you'd
Right.
heard one in 2003. And it reminded me that you actually have been around for so long that maybe our starting point before we dive into My Terms is to look at maybe a little bit of the history, and what better place to start than with P3P, the Platform for Privacy Preferences from 2002. There was even an O'Reilly book about it. I don't know if you remember this book. It was Web Privacy with P3P from O'Reilly by Laurie Craner came out.
I
So,
think I would. Yeah, I mean, I do remember that phase, and I think there was a phase even before that that for me was more meaningful. If you remember, and I think maybe around about 97, 98, 99, there was a subject called infomediary, right? And Hagel and Singer wrote a Harvard Business Review article, which I think was entitled "The Coming Battle for Your Personal Information." Right? And I think that then was followed up with a book that was called Net Worth, and it basically pointed towards what we now very clearly see. Right, there's a big battle around who can gather, who can use personal data. So for me, that word intermediary, right, as in an intermediary that helps data move backwards and forwards, was before P3P, because P3P I think was starting to say, hang on a minute, there's a problem here. All this data seems to be going in one direction and it's starting to get hoovered up by people. So can we build something that puts a bit of a pause on that data flow? But for me, this journey goes right back to 97, 98, 99, because I worked in Royal Mail in London. And back then we were investigating, what can you do at country scale? Digital identity, data stores, get stuff done. And what we found was, fabulous proposition. The technology wasn't right. The technology was nothing like right. It was very expensive to get up and running, very expensive to run on an annual cost, even at whole country basis. But that's the thing that gave me the bug that said, as a classical marketing CRM person, if you had tools on the side of the individual, the actual relationship would work better, right? Because it's like two peers rather than one party with more power than the other one.
my cat is meowing at me. I told
Really,
you, I said, we
I
don't stress about anything, including kids or pets. And I'm thinking, oh, what could possibly go wrong here? And then I'm seeing my cat is out there meowing at
well,
me.
I just assume he was
So,
agreeing with us.
Um, why didn't P3P get adoption? I mean, actually, when you said the rollout costs, I'm thinking, well, was P3P maybe an XML standard? And of course, it couldn't get adoption. But it was a machine readable format for to convey privacy, and it was supposed to, I think, help the human. Why did something like that fail? And what do we learn from those previous iterations?
Uh, I suspect that one failed. I mean, that one's not front of mind for me, PCP. I'm more familiar with the later ones, Do
It
Not
has been
Track.
23 years, Ian, so I
Yeah,
don't
yeah,
know why you've
yeah,
forgotten.
absolutely. I suspect back then, right, privacy online was not such a big deal, right? Because it was all quite exciting and it was about get stuff done. And there weren't too many digital relationships that you had, and it all seemed exciting and it all seemed to be going in a good direction. In my recollection, at P3P was effectively, a list of organisations that you were quite happy to share with. Yeah. I
So just
suspect
sitting
that
still.
it just wasn't such a big need as it would be now.
Hmm.
Whereas now the later ones are effectively don't get adopted because they're not commercially agreeable to big tech, effectively. Because anything that's blocking the flow of information is not a good thing.
And P3P would have done that.
Yeah, yeah. I
Um,
mean, I would contend, right, and it's a bit of a diversion. If we had empowered people, right, way back in that late 90s, early zeros, with the kind of tools and the technologies that we have now, right? So this smartphone thing is an incredibly powerful computer, right? It's far more powerful than most organizations. And I'm sitting inside a big bank at the moment. Right? The computing power that each person now has with their smartphone, it knows who they are, it knows where they are, it knows everything about them 24 hours a day. If the individual had that kind of capability way back in the late 90s, I think the model would have been different, right? Because the organization would just subscribe to the person rather than the other way around. Because if you think what happened is we all had our CRM systems and start to build up siloed records of customers or citizens or patients or employees or whatever they were. If we had the option just to say, oh, let me connect to you, more or less as you would do on LinkedIn or Blue Sky or whatever, that would have been a better model. But the technology wasn't there, right? So, if it was there, it was at vast cost.
okay. Well, I think that's a perfect pivot into my terms. Um, so, what is my terms, and why is it an IEEE effort?
Uh, my terms is essentially it's the nickname for IEEE 7012. Right? So IEEE 7012 is a standard for machine readable privacy policies that are written from the individual perspective. And that's something that, if you're familiar with Project VRM, which is Doc Serrell's, me, lots of folks have been talking for ever since 2007 about if you build things on the side of the customer, things get better. And that might be technology things or data things or data stores. But one of those branches of activity was, why should you have a separate privacy policy for every organization that you deal with, right? Didn't really make sense. It just happened by accident. Whoever wrote the first privacy policy, that was a big long job. Second person copied that one, third person copied that one. So the concept of you could standardize these things effectively learned from Creative Commons. So if Creative Commons did for copyright, where you can just say, look, right, there's a series of standard licenses. If I want anyone to be able to use my work, I'm just going to use that one. Yeah, agreement or license in the sky. Or if I'm being more restrictive, I'll use that other one. So a bunch of us have been working on information sharing agreements, privacy policies, probably from about 2013 in Customer Commons, right, which is a California not-for-profit. And we were approached by John Havens, who's a senior person at the IEEE, and who basically, I mean, John believed in what we were saying, and essentially said, "Why don't you work with us, and we'll help you standardise, right, and make machine readable versions of what you're talking about." And that was an attractive proposition, because if you look at IEEE, I mean, their biggest standard is Wi-Fi. Right, and Wi-Fi is clearly everyone. So 25 years after it published, everyone knows it. So it's, posh name is IEEE 802.11. Right, the nickname that everyone understands is Wi-Fi, and it just means there's a little triangle, and if you follow this ceremony, you'll get on the internet. So yeah, we signed up to go through that standardization process with IEEE. We started that journey in 2016. It actually took 9 years from then until now, until it published at the end of January. And I think that's partly because what we were doing is pretty tough, right? There's no getting away from the fact that was it challenged a lot of orthodoxy, and we took some rat holes effectively. So we explored different directions that looked promising, but then proved not to be promising. But eventually, we got there around about 18 months, 24 months. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't think we were ever particularly big on that subject, but more a case of, is it a license, is it a contract, whatever. But I think we can, round about 18, 24 months back, we stumbled on, okay, right, this is the right direction, tested that with multiple people. And then we spent the last 18 months working with IEEE to effectively polish the standard and get that out the door. So that was published as a free standard 28th of January this year, I believe. The fact that it's free is quite important, because that essentially means, well, clearly anyone can read it, digest, build to that standard. But it's also a good sign from IEEE that they believe this is an important thing, right? This should not have any. It's in their kind of standards for good type stream, if you want to think of it like that. That there should be no blockers to anyone using that.
Okay.
So it's a standard, and if I just, I'll give myself the next question. Much to our great surprise, having spent 8 years at that point in time building and polishing this story, I then presented it at the My Data conference over in Helsinki, I think September 2025. And it was a really good audience, maybe 35, 40 people, lawyers, business people, technologists. And that was the first time we'd really been allowed to talk about it publicly. And the feedback was blunt, good but blunt. It basically said, great, that all makes sense. How are you going to implement it? What's the user experience going to be like? How's the adoption path going to work? And how's enforcement going to work?
How do you make it real?
Yeah, absolutely. So that was having spent all those years on it, that was a kind of sharp intake breath to realise effectively we're only halfway through. Right? Because having a published standard is great, but published standard with no deployment is no great. So that's exactly where we are now. We're now working through, okay, how exactly we're going to implement this stuff, because it's clearly huge if we get it right. What's the user experience going to be? How's adoption going to be? And how's enforcement going to be? So that's what's keeping us busy at the moment.
Right. Before we get onto that, I actually wanted to ask a question about the standard.
Yeah.
So there's this rule about 80-20, 20% of the features give you 80% of the value. And there's a lot of 80-20 rules that you could sort of like justify. And I'm wondering, if you look at this spec, what's the 20% of the standard that you think delivers like the key value for this standard? What's the key innovation?
Yeah, great question. I think the way I think about it, and then we'll come back to the specific answer. I think the standard operates on 3 levels. Right? It's not a classic technical spec. You plug these things in and off you go. The top level, which is really the introductory, right, the first 5, 6 pages, is really all about manners. And it essentially says, do not do in the online world what would be unacceptable in the offline world. Right? So that's a big North Star type statement. But if you think that through, if you went into your local baker's shop, right, or any shop, right, and they start asking you a vast amount of personal questions, and they stick things in your bag and in your pocket, and then they come and follow you down the street to try and figure out where you go next, right? That would not be acceptable, right? The social contract in the real world would say, hang on a minute, what are you doing, right? Do not do that. So I think for me, that manner statement is really important because that's where we're trying to get to, right? The online world, right, is in bad shape right now in all sorts of ways because it's still, as Doc Sellers would say, yeah, barely beyond its teenage years. Right, it's still figuring out how to behave itself, and often it does not behave itself. You've then got the middle bit, which I tend to think that's more the handshake, right? That says, I propose, okay, we accept or we negotiate. So I think the answer to your question is what the key nugget, right? And it's actually the most difficult thing as well. The standard says the individual is the first party, right? And which completely flips the script from how things work at the moment, because at the moment we assume you go to a website, right, and you get a cookie banner served by the organisation, right? Or you might go a bit further than that and you sign up for an account and you get the consent checkbox type thing. Or you download an app and likewise you get the same sign up, sign in registration mechanic. And that always assumes that the organisation has designed the terms and the individual only has the option to sign up, sign in, or walk away. So the actual key nugget in the standard is the individual is not doing that. I mean, the individual is coming as first party and effectively saying, "Oh, I hear what you say about me signing your terms, but I don't like your terms. I want that one over there because that's the one that the influence have said I'm just buying a washing machine or whatever." So I think that's both the biggest nugget and also the most difficult step, right? Because it asks people to change behaviours, or you need to build that change in behaviour into agents. I mean, I guess the second is to build on that. The thing that we got right years back was we always assumed an individual would have an agent, right? Whether that's a browser, right, or a plugin, or an app, or a wallet, or a whatever. And the fact that it took us a long time to get the standard out means that it's no longer seen as crazy that an individual would have an agent. So I think the two nuggets are the person takes the first step of the dance, but it's not the person on their own. The person's tooled up, right, with agentic capabilities. Does that make sense?
You just needed 10 years for the technology to actually catch up to where you wanted to be when you started the spec.
Yeah.
So, a lot of times when we look at a technology like this, we want to see a killer app. Like, what's the killer app for a personal data source or VRM? And so I think this is where it does intersect with, um, sort of with reality. Like, how do you make it real? And so, in terms of rollout of this technology in practice, which use case do you see as really important to adoption of this technology?
Well, that one is actually quite straightforward, Mike, because anytime we talked to public groups about 7012, as it was called back then, because it only got its nickname about a year ago, the question that came back more than any other question was, can it just get rid of cookie banners? Right? I never want to see those things. Right? I just want rid of them and I want to click essential only. And I think that becomes the primary use case. I was over in Brussels last week, right? And there's a big conference over there called CPDP, right? Computers, Privacy and Data Protection. Big conference, probably the biggest in the world on that particular subject. And I was expecting the concept of privacy signals, i.e. a place to say, I don't want that stuff, to be quite niche at the conference. Well, it turned out to be not niche. It was probably one of the top 3 subjects, because the EU is going through a process at the moment of upgrading GDPR and various other regulations. And within that, they have what's called Article 88B, which is literally pointing towards people should have a single place to manage their privacy preferences. And we, i.e. the EU, will work with the standards bodies, the browser manufacturers, the mobile OS manufacturers, to make that so. So what, being several hundred miles away from Brussels, I hadn't realised just what a big deal this new signal thing is going to become. It's big, right? So I think that will be the killer use case. I don't want to see any more cookie banners ever again. And in doing so, I want to send the signal, right? Essential only. I want your service. I just don't want all the other stuff that goes along with it.
I'm really cracking up here because I have to say cookie banners are the world's stupidest invention.
Yeah.
And how much human productivity have they wasted? It's a ridiculous
there's some
ritual.
incredible stats, right? Because in the EU, right, they have a load of people pointed at this subject, and they've got big reports on here's the number of hours that have been spent, right, by people clicking on things, yeah, or not clicking on things, as the case may be, and how many hours and how many euros have been spent designing cookie banners.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, but I mean, just to reinforce that use case, then essentially what we are saying, right, because there's a lot of people working in the EU on what I would call better consent, right? So a slightly better version of the current model. My terms, what we've not really touched on yet, does not assume consent. It uses contract law as opposed to consent, and they're both valid bases for exchanging data in the EU. But when you move beyond slightly better version of what we currently have, and if you say, so why does a cookie banner exist? Right, it only exists for 2 reasons. Reason 1, right, regulations say the person must be interrupted before they push a button to share data to give them the chance to reflect on whether they really want to do that or not. So that's the friction reason for the cookie banner. The second reason they exist is to give the organisation the ability to record the facts that they need for compliance, so that they've got a record that says, oh, this user identity number, blah, 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 has consented to third-party cookies, everything. And this other one has consented to essential only. So it's there for those 2 reasons. In my terms, I believe it can address both of those things in advance of the cookie banner being surfaced, right? Because the person's already gone through the logical process that says, I don't want that additional stuff. And here's my record that says my default setting is service only. And the second thing it does, and it can tell you, and if you want to record that fact that I want to send your cookies only, here it is. Right? Here's the record in the browser header. So therefore, you don't need to serve that banner. So that was the story that I was essentially majoring on last week. And it's by no means, I mean, the concept was well received. Clearly, a lot of it's go. We now need to work through the detail of that. But I think that's a positive conversation.
So now I have to reintroduce Darth Vader into our narrative.
All right.
And say we talked about adoption by big tech as a barrier to P3P adoption because it restricted the flow of information back to the big tech, which is always bad.
Yep.
And so how's big tech going to react to this? You said, well, you don't need to serve the cookie banner. And I would argue that banner doesn't present an enforceable contract anyway, because because of the ritual of just accepting cookie
Yeah,
banners, you could argue that the user didn't really accept it, and therefore it just becomes what Doc Searles calls a contract of adhesion. If you had to read
yeah,
every single cookie banner like privacy policy, you would never get your work done. So you just
yeah,
have to clear it.
yeah, and
Um,
that's indicative of the whole model. The whole current model is completely broken. Right? There's no getting away from that. But there's also no enforcement. There's no significant enforcement of, right? Maybe if you're Facebook, right, or TikTok, you'll get a big fine every now and again for those kind of breaches. But the vast majority of organisations that present cookie banners, they're just going to. That's how things are done. That's the industry. I think if you're on the policy side of the EU, you've got a big lobbyist community basically saying, oh, right, you can't allow people to automatically select essential only because look at all these ad tech jobs, right, that you're going to lose. So I think but you're right, a contract requires a meeting of minds, right? So it has to be a genuine meeting of minds and a handshake that says, great, I understand what's been proposed and vice versa. Let's get on with it. And that's why we think the My Terms agreements are actually quite fair and equitable. Because essentially you start with the default position is service only, right? If we're engaging in a digital relationship, service only is where we start, which is, yes, I'd like to see your shoes or your car or your flights or your whatever service it is. I just don't want all that other stuff that goes along with it. And that, in privacy signals terms, it's not like P3P was or global privacy control is. So GPC is the current iteration, which exists, but it's what I'll call a data flow minimization standard. Right? If an individual proposes GPC and an organization accepts GPC, virtually no data flows other than that signal. So that's at one end of the EU kind of choice spectrum. At the other end, you've got things like the IEEE consent framework, which is the dominant thing that drives your cookie banner at the moment, with all the check boxes and 5,000 trusted partners really value your privacy. That's maximum data flow. Whereas what we're saying for the My Terms one is it's optimized data flow from the individual perspective. So yes, I want to do business with you. I just don't want all that other baggage that goes along with it. Yeah, and that I think that does work as a contract because I'm basically saying I want to do business with you. I just don't want all the other stuff.
I got distracted from my original question, which was around big tech adoption. Um,
Yeah, well,
and
actually, I got
what
distracted as
are they
well.
going to be
But
up
let me
for
come.
this? Yeah.
No, right. The is the short version. Then I did speak to someone from TikTok at that event last week, right? And I may as well be being not bothered. Perfectly nice conversation, but it's kind of like this does not compute. That cannot be so. So the actual view within the teams is it's not for big tech anytime soon. Right? It's much more for small businesses that really don't. Why should your local cafe or your local car repair shop need its own privacy policy? Right? The reality is they don't. So if you look at something like, I think, according to Dun& Bradstreet, there's 450 million organisations in the world. Probably 1 million of those are doing surveillance type stuff. So therefore, 499 million are not doing surveillance stuff. That's really the market, right, for My Terms in the early days. And it surfaces effectively like a trust mark that just says, My Terms welcome here. And once people start to see that, might be delivered as a WordPress plugin or any other means to get the trust mark out there at large scale. When people start to see that, to start to say, I understand that. That just means I've got my own standard privacy policy rather than a custom one. There's one nice thing that I think we built into the standard that might annoy big tech enough to adopt over time, which is the each time an individual says, I propose my terms, and the organisation can either say, great, we accept those, handshake, signed, both parties get a copy. Or they could say, actually, we accept my terms, but we propose this other one. And that allows us to do a little bit more, a little bit beyond service only. So that's the second thing they can do, is they can either just accept, or they can negotiate, or they can just ignore. And they can either ignore it because they didn't hear the signal, right, in the first place, because they weren't listening for the signal, or they did hear it but consciously chose to ignore that. So what the standard does in that model is it says the individual agent can record each time they send a signal and it's ignored. So in the early days, that's not a big deal. That's just going to be, oh, Ian sent a signal and it was ignored. That's one person. Then it's Ian and Mike, right? But once it starts to get up to, right, 1 million, right, and 5 million and 50 million people going, TikTok, I propose that my terms rather than become a bit more reputationally interesting. So big tech, not anytime soon, would be my short take on that.
Right. I have just a kind of random question for you. My terms is actually it's a pretty good name. It's one word, right?
Yeah, we tend to
One word
use
or
it
two?
without the space in the middle.
Okay, I'm fixing my banner right now. See?
Yeah.
And how long did it take you to come up with that name? Are we talking about days, weeks, months, voting?
I think it
Like,
just came
were
up
there
randomly,
other good
actually.
options?
I think it only came up probably about a year ago. And it just came out of someone in the team. I think there's 2 or 3 different people. We did have a kind of naming conversation. Multiple people, certainly not me, came up with my terms or our terms or fair terms, and
Mhm.
2 or 3 variations thereof. But my terms is the one that sticks, right? And if you look at the website, we've got the nice little logo, little friendly looking stick man with a my terms banner. So most people who've seen that framing like it.
Yeah,
We don't
no,
expect
it's
any
very
big brand or
concise.
organisation to put that on their website, so we might need a slightly more corporate looking trust mark, but we'll see.
It's an inverted crown. No, I like it. I asked because it took us an inordinate amount of time to come up with GovOps. It took us like 2 months or 3 months, and
Right.
everyone was ready to kill me. But I was like, it's actually important to get the right name.
Yeah.
It's got to be short and it's got to convey the meaning. And GovOps was the also unanimous. Like everyone liked it. If you can't
Yeah.
have one person who hates it, or it's no
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Well, I
So
think everyone in team anyway likes my terms. I think over we effectively have 8 agreements. Right? If you think in Creative Commons terms, there's 8 different things that you can point to. And I think my terms works quite well across all of those. The upside and the downside to the standard is every time we present on it, we get a different idea coming from the group that says, oh, you could use it for this, so you could use it for that. So I wouldn't be too surprised if we didn't come up with things where our terms, right, where it's maybe two peers working with each other rather than my. But that's
interesting.
down the track. Down the track.
Our terms, perhaps look for it in 2036.
Well, no, hopefully things are going to pick up pace from now, because I think let's face it, right, things on the internet are not working well at the moment. I mean, cookie banners are only the one very obvious part of that, right? But big AI, big tech, right?
So all
At
these
some point,
ideas,
the pushback from the individual side has to land, and I think this has got the best chance, right? Because it's
you mentioned earlier that my terms is contractual, right?
yep,
And that's fine, but me as an individual, I don't have time to sue my bakery because they're violating my terms. What does enforcement look like? And without enforcement, is this really meaningful?
Yeah, great question, and I think that's one of the areas where I think we are strong, right? And if you regard the GDPR as effectively the de facto global standard for privacy regulations, the regulation itself is perfectly fine, but enforcement has not been fine, right? Because all of these bad behaviours that clearly breach the regulations have not resulted in any enforcement. So clearly, for my terms, that could not be the case. So for many years, there's been a bunch of people working on what would be called online dispute resolution, or ODR. And effectively, that's about automated, contract-based enforcement via machines and standardized processes. So we've effectively, that's always been in the back of our head, right? That's going to be the way to do it. The example I would usually give is person signs service only agreement with an organization, which that means the organization has a copy of the agreement and so does the individual. And service only basically means service only, and it specifically means no third party cookies. So if the individual is up and running in that relationship, right, and somehow maybe there's a little cookie spotter plug-in on the browser, and it flags up to them, look, those folks that you contracted with on a service-only basis seem to have dropped a third-party cookie into your browser. Do you want me just to flag that up to the ODR folks? And yes, so that would be a single click, right? Evidence gathered, send that off to the online dispute resolution, which effectively goes through an automated process because both parties have signed up to that. And that can only result in, look, you did something that you clearly said you were not going to do, therefore enforcement kicks in and you need to pay this poor person, right, $100 or whatever it is. So that bit, I mean, we're absolutely still early on in getting that up and running, but I think that's as a way to do it is a good concept.
So one of the holy grails of this over the years has been a personal data store. And I saw a presentation at IEEE on the Agentic Identity Workshop from a group that they didn't want to call it a personal data store, but it awfully looked like one. And a question was surfaced, perhaps my terms should be the legal mediary between that data store and whoever wants that data. Is this is my terms finally the enabling technology?
I think it is, and I think it
data.
is, and we also got very good feedback from the SETI project over in Utah, who are also basically saying, right, so my terms would appear to be the thing that we need. Effectively, as a trust framework, right? It's standard based, it's very public, it's very open, and it's fair. So I think the real secret, in my opinion, for my terms adoption is not to go down any technology rat holes. Right? It's just a policy-oriented articulation of good manners online, right? That leads to a handshake, that leads to a contract, that leads to enforceability. Therefore, it should be adopted by all these different things. Because I think what it does, it elevates the position of the individual. If you go right back to what I said, relationships will work better when there's equal tooling on both ends of the party. That doesn't work if you're always signing up to the privacy policy and the terms of service of the organisation. Once you're both signing the same thing, you're effectively operating as a peer, which I think is more like a server-server relationship rather than client-server. So right now we're always operating in that, the client to someone else's server. Therefore, I'm only allowed to do what the server allows me to do. I think my terms elevates the individual up to, I am first party. Right? I've got my own agents. I've got my own terms. Therefore, it becomes a meeting of equals. So, yeah, I mean, personal data stores, wallets, plugins, all of those kind of things will be places where the individual's agent can live. and the individual is using their data store or whatever just to say, I want that service only one, or I want to donate to Data for Good, or it's an intention-based thing, or it's a. So I think My Terms is a very helpful innovation for lots and lots of different technology stack type things.
Interesting. So I feel like this is like the IAW session that I was reading the notes of that I missed, that I got a replay for, and I hope others appreciate that. But it's definitely really fascinating work, and sometimes these things are hard and they take 10 years. So
yeah.
Congratulations
Well,
on that.
as they say, much to the great surprise of the team, right? It might take another 10 years. Hopefully not, right? Because I think it'll pick up momentum from here. I mean, we do need help, right? We need lawyers, we need people to deploy, we need all sorts of things. Go and have a look at myterms.info as the website, because effectively you've got Customer Commons was the original founding group. My Data Global, kind of Helsinki-based not-for-profit, are also now. So I think we need the equivalent of the Wi-Fi Alliance. So when the Wi-Fi standard published, everyone said, "Oh, great! I'm a phone company. We make routers. We make whatever." You need something that helps the industry get up and running. So that's where we are. We're trying to form the My Terms Alliance as the bunch of folks with all sorts of different backgrounds and geographies that want to now make this reality. So if anyone's interested in helping out in any shape or just wants to know more, go and have a look at myterms.info.
Yeah, and it takes an ecosystem. Is really what you're describing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not only that is that we're trying to change the culture. We're trying to change human behavior, and cultural change takes time. So
Yep.
So I don't know, your statement that we might be 10 years away, or we have 10. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a lot of growth in the next 10 years as our society transforms and becomes more digital, and agents become more powerful and hopefully more
Well, that's the
governable.
bit that I think I don't actually believe it will take 10 years. It might take 10 years to get big tech and everyone else on board. But the pace at which AI and agentic AI is moving, right? People will have a consent agent, I guarantee it, right, within 6 months. You're then on the adoption. It's how many people are using that consent agent, or how many organizations are accepting that consent agent. But the actual capability is not far away.
Interesting. So before we break, I just want to give you a chance to share any last thoughts or things you'll be at, or takeaways questions I forgot to ask. Feel free.
I've been at IIW lately, and I was at the Brussels event last week. I'm going to be at the Smart Data Forum in London, 15th and 16th of June, which will be good. Beyond that, as I said, I think if anyone's remotely interested in helping out or just finding out more, go to myterms.info website and just follow the links and say contact us, and someone in the team will be in touch to try and persuade you to help out.
Okay, awesome. I just have a little bit of logistics. I want to announce the next episode. Oh no, this is not the next episode.
Not me again, Mike, is it?
We could probably do another 45 minutes, but wait. I'm good at, as we saw, I'm good at on the fly changes. It's Bhavna next week, and the crazy road of authorization. Are we really ready for agents? This is based on a conversation I had with Bhavna at IAW, and I said it would be a great episode. She wrote one of the original PDPs for Sun Microsystems back in the 2000s. So she has a really long view of this. And so she's going to be a great guest. So I hope people will join us for that. And one more reminder, follow IOH on LinkedIn and YouTube. We just passed 2,000 followers on LinkedIn, which is really great, but on the road to 3,000, I guess. And with that, I will say, Ian, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure to get a chance to visit with you a little bit. And thank you, audience, and we'll see you next time.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. Thanks all.